Have you ever asked yourself, if you had one wish, if you could wish for one superpower, what would that be? How would your life change because you had this superpower? What if I told you that we all have within ourselves right now a superpower that can change our life for the better, that can make us more money, that can strengthen our relationships? This superpower is the gate, the gateway, the doorway to the life that we want. Everything that we want is on the other side of walking through this doorway. What if I told you that you could build this superpower within yourself and that you could strengthen it and it would make you not only give you a superpower, but turn you into a superhuman? If you're new here, my name is Cody Jones, host of the Pure Wisdom Podcast, mindset coach, and entrepreneur. And today I want to talk about this very superpower that we all have that I consider discipline. Let's get into it. All right, everybody. Welcome back if you have been listening for a while, and welcome if you are new. I appreciate you tuning in. Again, my name is Cody Jones, host of the Pure Wisdom Podcast, mindset coach, entrepreneur. And today I want to talk about something that I do consider a superpower, which is discipline. Now, when we hear the word discipline, there's probably a lot of different things that we think of. There's a lot of different things that come to mind. We think of somebody perfecting and working on a discipline, doing a specific task, a certain career or otherwise. We think about something like military or martial arts, a very disciplined, a very structured organization. We think about disciplining children or something along those lines. But to set the stage of what I want to talk about today, when I say discipline, the simple meaning of this is that having a system with yourself, having a plan with yourself, that you are going to do X thing on X day, whatever the plan is, whatever the system is, regardless of how you feel, regardless of outside circumstances, regardless of anything that might come in the way between you and getting this task done. Because the simple fact of the matter, the simple truth of the matter is that the difference between people who succeed and people who fail, and when we say fail, we're talking about people who fail and stay there because, of course, failure is inevitable. It's just part of the process. The difference between people who succeed and fail and stay there is discipline. It is what you do when the time to do it gets difficult, when it comes time to do it, when that choice, that decision is difficult. And so what I want to do is I want to walk you through what I feel like are practical steps or philosophies to build discipline and have a disciplined relationship with yourself so that when you meet these obstacles, when you meet these challenges along building your career or building your business or whatever endeavor that you're on, you can refer back to these philosophies to help yourself to build discipline for yourself so that you can be on the other side of this curve. Again, I honestly do believe that this is a fork in the road for a lot of people. It's doing the easy thing, taking the easy route, which ultimately leads to failure of the endeavor, or it's doing the thing that's uncomfortable, doing the thing that we know needs to be done, even if it seems monotonous or trivial or whatever it is. Even if it's difficult, whatever it is, doing that thing when we know we need to do it. That is the fork in the road. So I'm going to go through what I feel like again are key points for this, and I'm going to sort of break this down into 5 different elements, and I think that as we go through this, you're going to get a sense of clarity about what I'm trying to refer to here. So when you're trying to build discipline, the first thing that you want to do when you're building discipline with yourself, the first thing you want to do is start with a sense of purpose. Because when these things, these obstacles, challenges, tests, whatever they are, the leaving the comfort zone, whatever that thing is that says to you, you shouldn't do this, back off, take it easy, whatever. The first thing you want to do is start with a purpose, because the purpose is what you can refer back to when it gets difficult. When the thing that you're trying to build, when the thing that you're trying to pursue gets difficult, you have a purpose. You can refer back to this and say, okay, it's challenging right now. It's not ideal right now. It's testing me and it is requiring me to put in effort, whatever the case is. But this temporary discomfort is part of a much bigger picture. It is attached to something that is much bigger than me. And that is usually you understand that when you know what your purpose is for the thing. So to be clear about this, especially in the entrepreneurship space, I do not believe that making money is a big enough purpose. Money is a big motivator for a lot of people, but it is not a big enough purpose to perpetuate that journey and continue that journey of entrepreneurship or building a business or career, whatever it is for you. It's just simply not enough, because as you all know, maybe you don't, but if you're on this path, there are things that happen to you and around you and to your business and to your career that will test how bad you want the thing that you're pursuing. And if you do not have a big enough purpose to motivate you, you may very well give up when those challenges happen. And money is just simply not, I would say for a very small percentage of people, money is probably a big enough motivator to keep them going. But if of course those people have bigger problems, because if money is that important to them, they're going to have bigger issues in their career or in their business. So when we say start with this purpose, it needs to be something deeper than money. It needs to be something deeper than status or achievement or something along those lines. I mean, you have to think about something like, for a lot of people, is legacy. Something like a legacy, like building a legacy. A legacy may start with them, but it's a much bigger picture. We're talking about generations after we're gone, generations that are going to benefit from the work that we're doing now. So if you have great grandchildren, generations from now, years from now, and they're going to look back and say, well, my grandfather, my grandmother, they built this thing and they didn't stop, and now we have the life that we live because of the work that they did several generations ago. You have to look at this on a long-term timeline, because again, the temporary discomfort of whatever it is that you're trying to pursue is much smaller and not nearly as important as the bigger picture that's attached to. So start with a purpose. Identify what that purpose is to you. It may very well be your family, and that is a huge purpose. That's something that's outside of yourself. There are people who are attached to the success of this thing that you're working on that are not necessarily just you. It's a bigger purpose. It might be somebody, your community. If you're a person who's really sort of involved with the community, it might be a sense of community, something that's outside of yourself. These people benefit from this thing that you're working on. And so once you start with the purpose, once you know why it is that you're doing this thing, pursuing this thing, again, it's attached to something bigger than you. When it gets challenging or when you get tested, you can refer back to this and say, okay, it's a bigger picture. The temporary pain that we feel is not nearly as important as the bigger picture that's attached to. Another way to look at this is, think about something that's challenging to you, or painful to you. The purpose of that pain was to stop you, to take you out. But the purpose of you was to achieve a much bigger goal that pain is just a small part of. So again, perspective. Have perspective on the challenge that whatever it is in front of you, and remember the purpose. When you have the purpose, the next thing would be very clear, and this has to be clear, very clear goals for yourself. Now, when we say goals, you hear a lot of people talk about like a 10-year timeline, a 5-year timeline. The farther out the timeline is, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, the farther out that timeline is, the less clarity you're going to have on that goal. Because if you've ever done anything that, takes a while, pursue an education, career, business, whatever, what you may find is that when you quote unquote become successful, it may look very different from what you thought it was going to look like. But if you're in that space and you allow yourself to sort of step back and say, okay, there was a time where I used to hope or pray or whatever it was for the situation that I'm in now, for this position, and now I'm here. And you allow yourself to sort of be aware of that and be conscious of that. The success may look very different from what you think it is. But when we say clear goals, you have to know at least where you're headed. Like this 10, 15, 20-year mark, you have to know at least what that maybe looks like. And it might change along the way, and that's okay. But you have to know somewhat where you're going, somewhat how you're going to get there. That might change again, but really what we're talking about here is like these long-term sort of visions, the goals within that vision, whether it's, weekly, monthly, a year. I don't think a year is too far out to set goals for yourself. These goals on these shorter timelines can 100% be specific, and they can 100% be something that you can attain along that timeline. So when we're talking about discipline, we're talking about having a system with yourself that you can refer to, and something that you can keep yourself consistent with. Goals are an incredible way to do that, because when you have goals for yourself, again, we're talking about entrepreneurship. Fitness is also a good example of this. If you have goals, let's just say fitness, for example, and you say that I want to lose 15 pounds, that's your goal. I want to lose 15 pounds in 3 months, whatever it is. You have a goal, you have a timeline. The goal was 15 pounds, the goal was 3 months. Regardless of what happens on that timeline, if you lose a pound here, you gain a pound there, weight does fluctuate, you know at least where you're headed, and you can measure your progress. Now, this is, in my opinion, this is probably why people don't have as clear of goals as they probably need to, is the way to measure it, because we don't want to try for something, a lot of us, and measure it and see that we're not where we should be. That's very, it can be discouraging, it can be awakening for a lot of us, but we need to be able to measure that. We need to see where we are along this path to get the ultimate goal, which the smaller goals are attached to, which in this case is losing weight. So when we're talking about building discipline, we started with a purpose. When we have that purpose, now we have clear goals that can help us get to the fulfillment of whatever that purpose is. In this case, we're trying to lose weight in this fitness example. So it's going to help you. It's going to give you clarity. It's going to give you something to measure. It's going to give you a timeline. That's very important, is a timeline on your goals. I have, in this fitness example, 3 months to lose this weight. That's very specific, because I'm sure you've heard people say before that, they were procrastinating on something, whatever it is. But the moment they had a timeline, the moment they had a deadline or a date, they made the thing happen. In a very, a very sort of extreme example of this is how Tony Robbins says, if you want to take the islands, burn the boats. Don't give yourself another option, just take the islands. Now, that obviously needs context, and I wouldn't recommend that for everybody in every situation. But if you give yourself that timeline or that deadline or that sort of is this or it's nothing, that sort of target, you would be surprised what you can achieve when you give yourself that quote unquote no way out. So the purpose, very clear goals for what it is that you want to do. You want to be able to visualize, measure, you want to be able to take action. This needs to be something that is directly related to the purpose, to the mission that you're on, and it needs to have a time to it. You need to have some sort of a time about a deadline or whatever. The reason this is going to help you with building discipline is because you're going to have a map, so to speak, for yourself. You're going to have somewhere where somewhat of what the next step is. Now that might change, but when we're talking about building discipline, you have to have this map, because we're going to get to this in a minute. That's going to help us build momentum. Okay, so we start with the purpose. We have very clear goals. The next thing, and we've kind of talked about it a little bit already, is a very stable system for what it is that you're trying to achieve. So a system in this fitness example would be like, we have the goals. We want to lose, let's just say, break it down to 5 pounds per month for 3 months. Well, what is the system? How do we implement that? How do we take that, make a plan, and then make that plan something that we're going to stick to, regardless of what we feel or what the outside circumstances are, or whatever the case is? What is the system that we're going to follow? What are we going to basically? How do we take this plan and make implementing this plan automatic? This should be a system. This should be like whatever the plan is, we do that automatically. So for the fitness example, it might be that you go to the gym X number of days per week. Maybe you go to the gym 3 days a week for, 12 weeks for the month, for 3 months. Whatever it is, that's the system. Now, once you implement this system, you have to be able to sustain that, because this is one of the most important parts of discipline. It's not that we have a system for ourselves and then, we're 3 weeks into this weight loss thing, and then we go Monday, Wednesday, Friday, maybe Friday rolls around and we don't want to go that particular day. We've already been 3 weeks. We're pretty consistent with ourselves. There needs to be a very valid reason on why you break that system. Why do you break that system with yourself? Because, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, that is going to be, not only does it break your system, it breaks your momentum, it breaks your routine, it also potentially breaks the self-confidence that you are building with yourself by keeping that system. And we'll get to that in a minute. But so this system needs to be something that you can basically do automatically. Now, one of the best ways that I have found to do this, you can, if you're a person who likes to visualize, you can maybe write out a calendar for yourself, a planner for yourself. You can have an accountability partner, if that's your thing, a friend or something. Say, hey, I told myself I was going to go to the gym 3 days a week for 12 weeks. I want you to help me keep myself accountable. Whatever, if that works for you. But one thing that I have seen that has been very powerful is implement this system into your identity. Make your identity part of this, or rather make the plan, the system, part of your identity. So what does that mean? Okay. So to use the fitness example, we're going to go to the gym 3 days a week for 12 weeks. We need to see ourselves as a person who is fit, as a person who is in shape. Now, if you're trying to lose 15 pounds and maybe you haven't lost any weight yet, maybe that might seem, it might seem kind of difficult to do that. You might feel a little bit of imposter syndrome because you're kind of seeing yourself as something you don't think you are yet. However, if you tell yourself, okay, I'm a fit person, this is what I want to do, this is who I am, like this is who I am. When that moment comes, that Friday comes up that you say, oh, well, maybe I should skip today, I want to take it easy. It is part of your identity. It's just who you are to go to the gym. That's just part of who you are. And so at a certain point, man, this is kind of off on a little tangent. At a certain point, something like the gym or something like that, once you kind of get in there and you start to see results, you have some momentum with yourself, you don't go to the gym for the results. It's almost like you go to the gym to go to the gym. Like that's just part of your routine. That's part of your day. That's part of who you are. It's like when people say, it's very easy for us to give ourselves excuses about, like, you hear this one a lot. Like people say, oh, well, if somebody says something and it offends me or whatever, I just speak my mind and that's just who I am. So why do we give ourselves these excuses on something like that, which is really like, I consider that a waste of energy, honestly. If somebody says something to you, it offends you, and you just have to speak up about it, that's a waste of energy. It's not going to do any good. It's just going to, like, it's a cycle of arguments. It's not going to do any good for anybody. We give ourselves that excuse when it's something like that. That's just who I am, to speak my mind. So think about how powerful it would be if we use that for something that was good, i.e., a gym routine or a business routine or whatever, a career, advancing your career or studying for your education, whatever it happens to be. When we take that into our identity and we say, I am, first of all, anything that comes after I am is extremely important, and we should be very deliberate and conscious about the words that come after I am. Because you see, especially like a good way to sort of demonstrate the power of this is something like politics. You hear somebody say, well, I am, whatever, I am conservative, or I am, like, whatever it is, liberal, or whatever it is. People take identity in things that they truly believe, they support, that they believe in, whatever the case is. And people have arguments with other people. People break relationships because of because of their identity. So that's just a long way to stress how important how we see ourselves and who we see ourselves as. That's just important to stress how it just shows how important that is. Another thing too, and I've said this on the podcast before, if you've listened to this, identity could really be, and I think I am going to do a whole separate video on identity, but it's I don't think that we it's so important that I don't think that we just achieve goals. I think that we become a person, and then we do things that that person is capable of. So it's not like we go to the gym. In this example, it's not like we go to the gym and then we become a fit person. No, we become a fit person. We become a person who's healthy mentally way before we do physically. Whatever point in that timeline it is for you, that you're in there, you're building that system with yourself, you're creating this identity with yourself. Again, you might feel imposter syndrome because you're not physically, you haven't matched up to where you are mentally, and that's okay. That's just part of it. But we become this person mentally. We become this fit person mentally. And then after we take that identity and we apply that to our outside world, then our body catches up. Then our business catches up. Our revenue catches up. Whatever it is that we're sort of it starts to match our identity. And so we just have to take this as this is who we are. Because when the thing comes up, the taking the day off or the rest day or the challenge comes up in the business or you lose money for the first time or whatever it is, this is who we are. This is especially with like entrepreneurs. Like you think about what is an entrepreneur, and when we think about that, most people probably think about somebody who has built something, a business, it's very successful. They started with nothing. It was, they had no money, whatever, no support, and they were just resilient and relentless and just consistent. And they built this thing. They built this thing because they had this desire. That's probably what a lot of us think of when we think of entrepreneurs. And for a lot of entrepreneurs, that is the sort of the, I guess, the path. But when you say I am an entrepreneur, that means that you are a person who is able to do all these things. Well, think about a person who's able to do all these things. A person who can build a business from the ground up and be resilient and withstand all these challenges. What does that mean? Well, that means that that person, whoever we visualize, whoever we're thinking about when we think about that word, entrepreneur, that person was able to, when they had these challenges, which they definitely had, when they had these challenges, they were able to look at it in a certain way, not let the challenge define them, because they had, with identity, they had already defined themselves way before the challenge got there. So they knew how they were going to not how they were going to respond, but they knew who they were going to be. So if they decided in their mind, I am an entrepreneur, okay, the first time they lost money or the first time they lost that big client or whatever it was, they had already decided with themselves, like, this is part of who I like being able to handle this and stay resilient and logical and make the next conscious, intelligent move from here. They have already decided before they got to that point that that's who they were. So again, identity is, I think, the best way to develop a system. And I am going to do a separate video on identity because it's so important. I mean, it's so huge. But identity, identity is one way. Like I said earlier, accountability partner, if that's something for you. If you're going to the gym, you can actually go to the gym with somebody else, and that'll definitely help you have an accountability partner in there, sort of built in. And the other one is if you're a person who likes to write things out, maybe put it in your calendar this day, what you're going to do, this kind of thing. You can double up on your goals that way too, by the way, because you can have a detailed plan for your goals, and then you can refer back to it on your system, with your systems. Also, too, just as a little side note, it is, a lot of people like to-do lists, which is, that's okay. That's good to do that. But to-do list actually, I've heard that it increases dopamine every time you can check off a list or a thing on your to-do list. So if that's something that you need to implement to have this system with yourself, whatever it is that you can stay consistent with this schedule. This is sort of a good transition to the next point, which is, and this sounds like it would be less valuable than it is, but this would be your small wins along the way. So what have we talked about so far? We talked about starting with the purpose. Why are you doing this thing? We talked about building discipline. How do you build discipline? How do you maintain this? Start with the purpose. What is the purpose? Once you have the purpose, then you have clear goals set for yourself on how you're going to make this purpose into an achievement. Then you have a system. Very powerful way to implement a system is through identity. Now we're talking about the small wins. This is where you're doing this thing and you're being consistent with yourself, and you have this schedule that you're keeping. take pride and be proud of yourself for the small wins. To use a fitness example, you're trying to lose 15 pounds in 3 months. Again, weight does fluctuate, and I would tell people to stay off the scale. I would probably not weigh myself more at the very soonest once a week. Probably not even that. But if you lose 5 pounds or 4 pounds or 1 pound, you should be proud of that. You should give yourself some you should be grateful for that, and you should be able to celebrate that with yourself. You should be able to accept that win, and because as you're going along in these small wins, 1 pound, 2 pound, 5 pounds, if you're trying to do, build a business, $10 here, $100 here, $5,000 here, whatever it is, when you're trying to build this thing and you have these small wins along the way, appreciate that. Give yourself an opportunity to appreciate that and be proud of that, and then use that to fuel your momentum forward. This episode is brought to you by XL Coaching Academy. Hey guys, I'm really excited to let you know that I started a mindset coaching business. So what I want to do with this business is I want to help entrepreneurs, business owners, salespeople, leaders, and fitness enthusiasts or athletes develop the right mindset to increase revenue, improve business or performance, and overcome the challenges needed to become the best version of themselves. You can get more information about this by emailing info@xlcoaching.academy. Now, we're talking about building discipline, and when things are challenging and things are tough, you are probably, regardless of what the endeavor is, you are probably going to experience losses way more than you experience wins, way more. But what you can do is you can look back over this timeline of these small wins and say, man, when I started this thing, I didn't think I could do this, but now that I'm looking back over this, like I lost pounds here, I lost pounds there. I built muscle, building a business. I gained money here, gained money there, gained clients. You're able to look back over these small wins and refer to these wins. And this is an incredible way to build self-confidence. People talk about self-confidence and they talk about like loving yourself and all that. And all that is 100% true, man. It is. We should love ourselves. But I think we all have this sort of, this bullshit meter that just seems to go off when we're not happy with ourselves. We feel unfulfilled. We feel like, we are not living up to our potential. And if we're in that spot and we say, oh man, I should just love myself. I mean, yes, but at the same time, your higher self is you're going to hear that voice inside of you, and it's going to say, okay, I appreciate that. I get that. But are you really living up to what you could live up to? And so when we talk about small wins and how it sort of helps you stay consistent and moving forward, it's going to build self-confidence with yourself, because every single win that you get, and I'm talking about a win, I'm talking about something that you win. I'm not talking about something that was, luck of the draw or something that was given to you. I'm talking about something that you work for and that you achieve and that you pull off when initially you probably didn't think you could. And if you look back, if you allow yourself the self-compassion, which we're going to talk about that in a minute. If you allow yourself the compassion to look back over this and say, you know what? When I started this, I didn't know anything. I didn't think I could do this, whatever the case was, but I did it. And now I'm here, and I am here because even though I didn't believe in myself, even though I didn't know anything, I didn't have any relationships, I didn't have any money, I didn't know where to start, I started. Now I'm here. That is going to build a relationship with yourself to where now you can trust yourself, and you can look back over those small wins, and you can use those small wins to then motivate yourself to go forward. So when it comes to building discipline, you have to be able to appreciate the small wins that you have along the way, and understand that the reason that these wins are so valuable is because there's so few. The ratio from wins to loss is, I think 1 to 10 is very, very generous. I mean, I think it's more than that. But you have to give yourself some appreciation and be proud of yourself for the wins that you have along the way. This is going to help you build self-confidence. This is going to help you have that relationship with yourself so that when you do feel like giving up, or the thing does come along to test you, or you do have the challenge or the obstacle, whatever it is, you can refer back to this. Again, I know I've said this a couple times now, but you can refer back to this and say, okay, I made this thing happen. I did this. I did that. And you have this momentum with yourself. And so if you've done all that in the past, if you've had those wins in the past, why not now? Why can you not overcome this thing now? If you've had those wins in the past, why did you have all those wins just to give up now, just to miss this one day? The reason you had those wins, the reason you were able to build that with yourself is because, let's say, use the Friday example. Now here's a Friday, 3 weeks, 4 weeks into this thing that you want to skip. You would not have had those wins, those couple pounds lost or whatever it was, if you skipped just because you wanted to skip on a Friday. You would not be building the business that you're building and having these small wins of these clients and this revenue if you didn't want to put in the extra hours when it came time to put in the extra hours. So just kind of remind yourself of really of who you are and how you've been able to build this thing. And again, self-love, this is kind of a different conversation, but with self-confidence, that is built when you prove yourself to yourself. And one of the ways to do that is small wins. One of the ways to do that is kind of like what we talked about earlier with the keeping the promises to yourself, keeping that system to yourself. Whatever the plan is for yourself, you keep that commitment with yourself, because then you know that if you tell yourself you're going to go to the gym X number of days, 3 days a week, and you do that, you're building trust with yourself. You're building that relationship with yourself so that when this comes up, like this challenge or this question or this test, you can look back at yourself and say that you trust yourself, that you believe in yourself. You have confidence in yourself because you put yourself through this journey up to this point, and you can depend on yourself. This is a really good transition into the last point that I want to talk about, which is self-accountability and also self-compassion. Now, self-compassion is something that's not usually talked about in the discipline space. Usually, when you hear people talk about building discipline and doing the hard thing, doing the difficult thing, self-compassion is usually not something that is referred to. I think the reason for that is because it's very easy to have an excuse of why we don't want to do something and label it as self-compassion and use it as a loophole to get out of whatever thing it is that we know we need to do. You can only be self-accountable or self-compassionate with yourself if you have previously built this relationship that we talked about with the self-confidence with yourself. Because if you don't have this relationship with yourself and you are telling yourself, trying to keep yourself accountable, maybe you missed a day, maybe you didn't do as well as you thought you would, whatever. How can you trust what it is that you're telling yourself? How do you know if you're giving yourself constructive feedback or if you're just being a tyrant to yourself? Same thing with self-compassion. If you don't have this relationship of self-confidence with yourself because you've built this along the way, because you've kept promises that you made to yourself, if you don't have that relationship, how can you be compassionate with yourself when the time comes, when you have to, refer back to these wins and say, listen, maybe you went in today, maybe it was a game or a sale, a business meeting, whatever it was. You went into this thing and you didn't perform as well as you thought you would, but look at what you've done in the past. Like you showed up. Maybe you weren't ready to release that book or that podcast or whatever it was, and you release it and you think it's not perfect, it's not what it could be, but you showed up. You put the thing out there. You took that first step. You could have very easily worked around that, and you could continue working on the book or on the podcast or whatever it is. And you can work on it so much that months go by and you're working on this thing and you never put it out to the world. You never release it. You have to be able to be compassionate with yourself in these times. And again, you can only do that when you have that self-confidence with yourself. So how is this important with building discipline? Why does this matter with discipline? So after everything that we've talked about already, by the time we're in this time in the conversation, we have a system with ourselves, we have our goals, our purpose, we're motivated by our small wins. We have to be able to stay disciplined and to have discipline to pursue a thing. We have to be able to be compassionate. Let's start with accountability. We have to be able to be accountable with ourselves. And I think we've talked about that, a lot here. The system, the goals for ourselves. These are all very clear, tangible ways that we can keep ourselves accountable. Okay, well, what does the system say? What does the plan say? We either did that or we did not. Okay, well, if we did, let's reward ourselves for that. Let's celebrate in that win. If we did not, why did we not? Was there a very valid reason on why we didn't? Now, again, you're going to have this conversation and this relationship with yourself so that you are not giving yourself a loophole and an excuse of why you didn't do this thing. But let's say that, you're trying to go to the gym for 3 days a week for 3 weeks or for 3 months. You miss a day. And the reason that you missed that day was because something happened. You were at work. You were working late. By the time you would have went to the gym, you would have had a very short, rushed workout. You would have lost sleep that night. It would have been a cycle of a domino effect of what could have happened because had you went to the gym. Now, the question I would ask is, whatever that thing was, like you working late, was that a real thing? Was that something that was really outside of your control? Or did you do that just to give yourself an excuse to not go to the gym? And again, this is why you have to have this relationship with yourself. This is why you have to have that self-confidence with yourself. Because I can look at it, anybody, if you have an accountability partner, they can look at it. Anybody from the outside can look at it. But you have to be honest with yourself and know if you're giving yourself a loophole or an excuse or a reason to get out of that. Now, if it's something that's valid, if it's something that, really, maybe it really did make sense. Maybe it was an injury, maybe it really did make sense for you to skip the gym that day. This is where the self-compassion comes in, because again, I can tell you anything. A trainer can tell you anything. Your partner or accountability partner can tell you anything, but you have to be able to tell yourself this. This is where it all, this is the importance of this. Maybe it was a valid reason. Maybe it was better for you to skip the gym. And if that's the case, you need to have compassion for yourself. Okay. Let's say it was an injury. Very valid reason to skip if it is in fact an injury. You should be able to have that compassion with yourself. And again, everything we've already talked about, you're going to look back over this timeline and you're going to say, you know what? I kept these promises that I made to myself. I was there every day that I said I was going to be. I did everything that I said I was going to do. I promised myself I was going to do. I did it. So now you can have that compassion with yourself, have that conversation with yourself. And this is where, there's a law of polarity that says everything that you think about that exists, its opposite also exists. So if it is possible for us to be our own worst enemy, and it is very possible for us to be our own worst enemy, that means that we also have the ability to be our own best friend. And when you're pursuing anything, fitness, career, entrepreneur, relationship, whatever it is, you are with yourself in this life 24 hours a day. You are in your own mind 24 hours a day. And if in your own mind is something that you cannot be grounded in and have a conversation with yourself and figure out, should you hold yourself accountable, or should you be compassionate with yourself? You have to be able to have this conversation with yourself, and you can only have this conversation with yourself if you have the self-confidence enough to trust yourself. And you can only have self-confidence to trust yourself if you keep these promises that you make to yourself. So to close this part out on discipline, when the thing gets difficult, or when you're challenged, or when the obstacle comes up, when you're tested, if you're questioning yourself, whatever it is, you have to have that relationship with yourself to either hold yourself accountable or be compassionate with yourself. I would say that if you are always showing up you're and over a long enough timeline, if you do this long enough, you're going to see that sometimes you have good days, sometimes you have bad days. Sometimes you make a sale, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have a very good interaction, a very good podcast, sometimes you don't. But showing up a lot of the times is the win. Showing up is the achievement for you. We can't wait and try to perfect things and try to put things out only when we're ready. Because if we wait for the right time is going to pass us up. Sometimes you just have to put the thing out there, and you just have to let yourself make those initial failures so that you can improve from that and then grow from that. Because we can, to go back to the book example, we can write something and a podcast, we can work on it, we can just, work around releasing it. But sometimes we just have to put it out there. So showing up is always better, in my opinion, than showing out, because you're not going to show out every single time. You're not. Again, going back to the wins, the win-loss ratio is so skewed towards loss. Another thing that I want to say about this, and I'll close out in a minute, but this is we talk about consistency, being consistent, being accountable with yourself, being compassionate with yourself, being consistent. While we're on this topic, and I've said this on the podcast before, consistency is a direction and not an action. So, and this is just me, I can't say that this is going to work for you or that you should do this. We were talking about earlier about the injury. To me, as long as I'm moving in the direction of my goal, that is consistent. The days are going to vary. You're going to have really good days, really productive days, really bad days. But as long as you show up and you do the work that needs to be done, whether that's some days it might be 10 steps forward, some days it's only one step, but you still showed up. And listen, that day that you did one step is going to be far more important than the days that you did 10. Why? Because when we're building discipline and you need to look back over that timeline, that day that you only took one step, that you didn't want to show up, but you did show up, that is going to be one of the days that you refer to and you say, man, I just felt like shit that day. Like I just felt really bad. I just didn't want to show up. I was tired, whatever it was, but you did it anyways. You made 10% of what you make on a really good day, 10% progress. That is going to be one of the days that you refer back to. Consistency is a direction, not an action. As long as you're moving forward. To go back to the injury, I was going to say this. To go back to the injury example, me personally, and I can't say this is going to work for you. Me personally, if it was an injury, I would try to exercise a different part of the body, or whatever, just to keep moving in that direction. If it was something I couldn't exercise, I would maybe try to do some sort of light cardio. If I felt like I couldn't do light cardio, I would maybe walk. Walk a couple miles, whatever it was. And if I couldn't do that, then there's probably a bigger injury going on. But if I couldn't do that, I would do something mentally, I think, productive, or mentally exercising, some sort of mental exercise. So we covered a lot here today, and I want to summarize sort of what we talked about. Building discipline so that you can maintain your direction along the path when things get difficult, when you don't want to do the things, when the things get challenging, when you're tested, when you want to give yourself a day off, when you should give yourself a day off, when you should give yourself credit. All these things are built into what I consider discipline to be. So to summarize, we said we start with a purpose. Once you have a clear purpose, then you can develop very clear goals for yourself. Once you develop what those goals are, how you can measure them, how you can attain them, a plan, a timeline towards those goals, you can then develop a system for yourself. We mentioned that identity is a very powerful way to have that system with yourself. We also mentioned accountability partners. We also mentioned things like to-do lists. We mentioned things like putting it in your schedule, in your calendar, whatever that is for you. You can also, one thing that we didn't touch on that is actually really, really important in this system, sort of the system building, is habits. you can habit stack. So just real quick, if you have, and this might not work for a gym routine, although I think it could, you could stack it with something that you already do. So let's say that you want to build a habit of meditating in the morning. So wherever it is that you meditate, whatever it is, if you use an app or whatever, you already have that. Let's just say you link it to something that you already do. So whenever you get out of the bed, if the first thing you do is I don't know, turn your lights on or whatever it is, something simple, brushing your teeth, whatever it is, sort of stack that thing that you want to do with that other habit, because then it becomes sort of, it's almost like it's related to that other habit, and you just do it because you're already doing these other things. Habit stacking is something that we did not touch on with building a system, but is actually very effective for some of these smaller routine type things, meditation and those kind of things. The next thing we talked about was small wins, allowing yourself to appreciate and be proud of the small wins that you have along the way, because these small wins are going to be way fewer than the losses. We know that, but the small wins are what's going to be help perpetuate you towards the making this goal happen and achieving this goal, especially the small wins that you made when you did not want to show up. And I would consider, if there's a day that you don't want to do something, you don't want to go to the gym, you don't want to make those calls, you don't want to make those cold calls, the days that you don't want to do it, but that you do in fact do it anyways, those are actually not small wins. Those are huge wins, but those would be the ones that you're going to refer to the most when the thing gets difficult, when you want to give up, or when you want to, take the day off and not do what you're supposed to do. The last and final thing, kind of two things into one, is self-accountability and compassion. At a certain point in this timeline of building this thing, you are going to build a relationship with yourself, self-confidence with yourself, because you're proving yourself to yourself. Self-confidence is not about just, loving yourself and saying you're this and that or whatever. The reason it's so important is because when you are pursuing these things, building a business, building a career, fitness, relationships, everything we've already talked about, you have to be able to have conversations with yourself and know when to be accountable, when you hold yourself accountable, and when to be compassionate with yourself. You have to know when to do this. And you can only truly do that. You can only be honest and trustworthy and trust yourself when you have built self-confidence with yourself, when you have got out and proved yourself to yourself. So that sort of wraps up the conversation of discipline, maybe why discipline is important, building discipline. I'm probably going to do a separate video on maintaining discipline. I think building discipline and maintaining discipline are two different things. But essentially what we're talking about here is how to overcome these challenges when the path to your goal gets difficult, how to make these sort of a routine or a system for yourself. These things are all, again, I think that this is the fork in the road between the people who succeed at a thing and the people who fail at a thing. This is the fork in the road. This is what separates, this is what decides who wins and who loses. So again, if you're new here, I appreciate you tuning in. My name is Cody Jones, host of the Pure Wisdom Podcast, mindset coach, entrepreneur. And if you've been following the podcast for a while, I definitely appreciate you tuning in and joining again. You can find all the content, Pure Wisdom Podcast. That's YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, Instagram. It's everywhere you get your podcast, essentially. But I appreciate you guys tuning in. I'll catch you on the next one. And until then, keep killing it. Hey everybody, listen, I really appreciate you guys tuning in today, man. If you like the content, if you found this episode useful, you can visit us on social media. That's YouTube, TikTok, Spotify, Amazon Music, Rumble, Instagram, Facebook, and Google and Apple Podcasts. There you can like our videos, follow, subscribe, and share. And again, we appreciate it. We'll see you next time.